Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Wordy Pair Podcast. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I'm hoping that the noise from a television in another room isn't being picked up on my microphone, but I believe it is not, so I am Justin.
I can't hear it, so we're in pretty good. As long as it's below a certain decibel level, it'll be gated out, except when you're talking.
Yeah. Well, no, it's probably not even gated out then.
Well, no, I mean, I will gate it out.
I don't think I have anything, I don't think I have anything that gates it out on my end.
No, you don't have to. I do noise gates on all of our audio. Anyway. So today we're talking about something that, we're going to start talking about something that we saw recently, memes, Twitter, whatever, various pop culture references to it, but apparently people not only dislike the third-person point of view, but according to one thing that I saw and read, people, like young people these days, can't even effectively read something written in third-person omniscient. And I found this both sad and hilarious.
I think you've talked about before these so-called studies. Some of them aren't to be
Sure,
taken,
I mean, the methodology might be garbage. That's perfectly possible. But it still did become a meme that someone posted that I saw. So we're going to pretend that it's exactly true, which is the responsible thing to do, and we're going to riff on these hypothetical people that can't read third-person omniscient. Or rather,
I think we should do that.
Rudy laughed internally as he considered laughing at the people who cannot read the third-person omniscient. Justin did too.
I didn't laugh internally, I'm laughing out loud.
Well, you can do both. So, I mean, first of all, my first impression is just that, in general, people are reading less and therefore becoming less good at it, right?
That's definitely a good consensus overall, and I have witnessed this slow degradation across 2 generations.
I mean, we did a very short video on it a while back where it was, your fantasy and my reality stomping on your fantasy.
Yes, that is true. What was that called? The Technicolor something?
Something. I'll link to it in the description.
Yeah.
Anyway, if people are reading a lot less, then the things that are most popular are going to be the things that people are most skilled at reading, and anything that deviates from that is going to be much less, both less enjoyed and less comprehended, right? I think that's a fairly logical progression.
Fair, yeah, that's fair.
So what we have is a bunch of stories that are being written. Oh, okay, so just before we get into things where we're being a little bit tongue-in-cheek, there are proper uses for the first-person perspective in books. I use it all the time. I love it. I use it because it helps me maintain a mystery a little bit more easily than someone who's super skilled like Agatha Christie could with third-person omniscient. If you've ever read 10 Little Indians, that book is written in third-person omniscient. But she's very careful to give you views of everyone and what they're thinking, just not at the right time to solve the mystery accidentally. That is something you can do intentionally, or it is something that you can do unintentionally, or it is something that can just be a sad accident that suddenly, you're doing third-person omniscient for characters A, B, C, and D, but you never actually get into the head of character E, and your reader goes, hey, wait a minute, right?
Right.
So you can spoil a good mystery that way, and so if I'm writing something that has mystery elements, first person is pretty natural, plus I do have as a major influence for me is Rex Stout, and Rex Stout wrote the entire Nero Wolfe series in first-person perspective. So it's not bad. We're not trying to say that.
Yeah, well, in fact, it's you can write in any perspective you want. Well, I mean, as long as it's a real perspective, and
yeah, and you can do it well too.
Yeah, and pretty much. I mean, I can't think off the top of my head of any genres that absolutely require a certain point of view for it to work. So
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you can do it for anything.
Well, I mean, inspirational books can often be written in the second person, whereas almost no other genre can be written in the second person, or at least is frequently written in the second person. But aside from that, I think you're exactly right.
I mean, I've gone down all those routes with all sorts of stories. I have written mysteries in both first person and third person.
Yep.
I've done a mix of first person and third person in single stories.
Yep.
I've done the third person omniscient where... Okay, so what level of omniscience are we talking about when we say third person omniscience? Because there's stories where it's assumed that it's third person omniscient because you see the story from several people's third person perspectives.
Yeah.
Narrated by a narrator, not by necessarily that character.
Right.
So the idea, I guess, is it's like a third person perspective that's not omniscient would generally focus on one or few characters.
Yeah, there would be one character that you're always kind of... Sometimes I have come to kind of call it third person over the shoulder, since I play a lot of video games, and there's a lot of video games that are played from a third person over the shoulder perspective.
Yeah.
Right? And so you're seeing things from a certain person's perspective, but you're also getting things that the person is not saying, and maybe even some things that the person's not really even bothering to notice, right? Like, you might have a paragraph in there that's description that your main character that you're POVing from doesn't actually care about or think about or even really pay attention to. Third person omniscient, to my understanding, is when you are far enough away from a particular character's perspective that you tend to be kind of hopping from one of their heads to another with relative frequency, kind of more than a couple of times per chapter kind of basis, right? Because like my most recent book, it's written mostly in the first person perspective, but I have these chapters that are from a different perspective, and I didn't want to put them in first person also. I felt that would be confusing. That if you're going to do first person, it should be first person for real, or like it can go halfway and then maybe switch once, but you shouldn't be going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
And so you have to have a methodology to it.
Yeah, you have to think about it a little bit so that your reader doesn't get confused or frustrated or irritated. Because even if you like it and even if you think it's done well, if your reader gets frustrated and puts down your book, well, you've lost, right? At least you've lost future sales.
Yeah.
So for these other little chapters, I deliberately went to a third person, not omniscient, but because I jump between 5 different characters, it's closer, but they're separated in time. So it's probably not quite a third person omniscient, but the reader gets to hear what the character that we're working from, we get to hear what they're thinking, what they're feeling, their perception of the people around them. And at the same time, if they're talking to the antagonist, we don't get to hear the antagonist's thoughts. In third person omniscient, you might hear the antagonist's thoughts pretty regularly, even while they're right in the middle of a conversation with the protagonists.
Yeah, there's ways you can... I use that a lot for humor by showing an event that happens from the third person perspective from one character, and then going into the head of another character and having them analyze it and come to a different conclusion.
Yeah.
That's one of many ways you can use it, but
So what you're saying is that you're writing jokes that are too complicated for the average person to understand these days.
Yes.
What kind of highbrow monster are you?
Yeah. Well, no, seriously, like the one I'm working on now.
Yeah.
It starts with one character, and after a couple of paragraphs, it's another character, and then you're inside the head of a bit character who's observing what the other characters are doing, and then you're back to the main characters, and the perspective is it's always third person in this one, but it's always jumping around as well.
Yeah, that is
you know,
classic
you cut
third-person
away.
omniscient.
It's kind of like movie style, where it's like you cut away from the heroes, and now you're looking at what the villain is doing, and you're getting some of that perspective. And
right.
Yeah, so that's like, when I write in third person, I almost exclusively write that. I've written very little that was long, where I stuck with one character for an entire third person segment.
Well, I mean, like, again, I'm kind of thinking that we might practically draw the line kind of at the 2 perspectives per chapter kind of point, right? If you have more than that, you're probably omniscient, and if you're not more than that, then maybe you're not. But you know, there is a gray area there.
We're drawing lines in all the sands now. No, it's true though. It seems that there's a lot of people that, this is again just from my experiences on the world of Twitter writing communities.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people that not even just the omniscient third person, but third person in general, they cannot stand, and they think that it's a defective writing trait, which I just don't understand that.
See, I haven't seen much of this from writers. I've seen, you know, videos and memes from readers that are like, I can't stand third person. And I can't understand third person omniscient. Therefore, I'm not going to read any of those books. Tell me more
I think they just can't
about
read.
the writers. I mean, there's certainly an element of that. Again, people who don't read much can't read much. And so, you know, we end up in the situation where everybody's looking for the next 15-second TikTok video, and no one wants to read, you know, a full novel, let alone full novella, let alone a full novel.
Dog agrees.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about these cases where you've heard people talking about how they really hate third person, it's defective, because I want to hear more about this.
Well, I have to make assumptions, and my big assumption is that they're overly euphemistic blackguards who have no ability to write outside of their own personal experience or use imagination in any way whatsoever at all.
Okay, interesting.
And so they can't write in third person. And they can only write in first person because they're essentially always telling their own story.
Yeah, and so they sour grape third person?
Yeah, because they think that it's not legitimate because they couldn't conceive of being able to write something that way. This is the only theory I have been able to come up with. I am usually good at coming up with multiple theories on why something is. This is the absolute only one I've been able to come up for this.
I mean, we can extend this to the deterioration of modern day debate in the sense that nobody seems to be able to consider the other person's position as possibly legitimate. This is a common problem, and third-person omniscient requires you to have empathy for multiple different positions in rapid succession. And so if you're not able to do that, you can find it very frustrating. The author is telling you A, and then a minute later they're telling you not A.
We can see it in a lot of recent pop culture, too.
Sure.
Video games have been... have had a bit of a there's been a downturn. I guess that's the nicest way to put it.
Yeah, we'll call it
that. If I could be an overly euphemistic blackguard for a moment. The writing in a lot of it always, I think the biggest problem that people are starting to see with these games that are supposed to be these big budget AAA extravaganzas and are just failing utterly, a lot of times the problems that people are having with it is they're getting through story elements and they're just like, none of this you have multiple characters who are giving their opinions and ideas on things, but it all sounds like it's the same person delivering it. Yeah. Or if it's someone that you're not supposed to sympathize with, it all sounds like they all have the same elements that are supposed to make them, say, villains, but they all seem like the same things that one person would assume makes a villain.
Right. So what you're saying is we need more morally gray characters, because that's not also an overused trope.
Yeah, no, there's no problem with morally gray characters. It would just be nice if there were some...
If they actually were morally gray and not just considering, 126 to be white and 128 to be black.
Yeah, and it's I mean, it's not like it can be fun and even challenging to write a morally gray character. I mean,
Sure.
I don't tend to do very many morally gray characters in my stories. I kind of like.
I mean,
going
it is an overused trope. That's also the joke, right? But but your character, but like, I mean, Ray Peril, I think, is a good example of a morally gray character done right, in the sense that he's not thinking about the morality of what he's doing, and his conception of who has the right to do what is very different from the readers. It's almost assumed to be.
Yeah.
Whereas Tammy, as a character, has a much more conventional perspective, right? And so the contrast there is something that consistently like confuses or baffles or surprises her, which gives her interesting reactions to things that are going on around her. It helps to make the book more interesting to read.
Right. And I'm going to fully agree with you on that, because I agree that it's interesting.
but like this is the thing that people find hard to do these days. They find it hard to make a guy who, sometimes does the right thing but does it for the wrong reason, or sometimes does the wrong thing but does it for a right reason without being super duper morally congratulatory to that person for doing the wrong thing for the right reason, right? Like,
right.
The guy who steals the bread to feed his starving family. There's never any hint that, what he's done is actually wrong, or that he recognizes it as wrong. He just feels self-righteous, and the reader is supposed to feel self-righteous along with him.
Yeah, that's the trope for the ages right there.
Yeah.
I think that's really what it comes down to, though. I think that, people's dislike or inability to read and understand, comprehend, and sympathize with the third-person omniscient all comes down to the lack of people being challenged to use their imagination from a young age.
Yeah. Or, I mean, part of it could just be that, I mean, it's not necessarily just imagination, but also I think that, like, changing perspectives is probably a bit of a skill in itself. Like, changing the perspective that you're looking at something. And so if you're reading something, and it's constantly hopping from position A to position B to position C and back again, if you're not comfortable with that is definitely it does reflect on your reading capability, but it is something that could frustrate someone who's not used to that kind of exercise, at least until they become used to it.
Yeah, and I think that anyone could really adapt to it, even if they've spent their whole life not really trying to.
Sure, I mean, but one has to have hopes.
Of course, having a lack of imagination also reduces some of the impetus to try.
That's another good point, yeah. I mean,
I believe that, when I say that people aren't challenged at a young age, if you think about it, you can see this in both young people and like younger adults today, where when there is a challenge they face, it is not something that they put to a real cognitive process. It's pull out the phone and find the solution that someone else has come up with situation in most cases.
At Grok, is this true?
Yeah. Oh God, that's the worst. Like, I didn't understand what people were doing when I first saw that. And I was like, what do you mean? Why are you asking Grok if this is true? We've already established that AI hallucinates, and
man. Okay, so we had 2 episodes about AI hallucinations. They were solidly about that, and they were quite funny. And maybe I'll link them in the description. But
now, one was the dead internet theory one, right?
No, we had 2 there was that, but I was thinking more about the 2 in a row that we did with you doing AI drawings.
Oh yeah, that was 2 in a row, right?
We can do the dead internet theory one as well. But the other thing is that even if you're just using AI for like text, like in text form, and like asking it direct questions, it will very frequently, not even necessarily hallucinate, but it will put things in quote marks that aren't quotes. It will tell you a source that is not the correct source. It will send you on wild goose chases to find something that doesn't really exist. I mean, I just did this the other day. I had a very frustrating several hours where I was trying to like track down the process by which a specific bill became law back in the early 1800s. And Grok gave me not Grok, but it was ChatGPT. ChatGPT gave me some good starting points, and it gave me one good quote, but then it gave me another quote that was not real, It gave me another quote that came from a letter that doesn't exist. And then it also made a bunch of conclusions that weren't correct based on the actual information. And so I ended up finding myself pouring through the official Senate and House records from 1805 through 1808 to discover when a certain bill did a certain thing. I even discovered that Wikipedia was wrong about it, where Wikipedia confused the Senate saying, "We will read this bill," with the Senate saying, "We have passed this bill." And so they have a date in the Wikipedia article for this thing that is 2 years off of when the thing actually happened, or a little under 2 years off. But like they say 1805, and it actually happened in 1807.
Yeah, and this is... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, I suppose I could try to edit that Wikipedia article, but people are so dependent on, like, sourcing that I didn't feel that it was worth my time to explain why the date that they had there was wrong, and so I was just like, I can use this date to find the earliest mention of this bill, and I'll need that later, so I'm just not going to bother with this right now.
Right, and actually it's pretty interesting that I've heard you tell that story before, and it's a good example.
No, this happened on Saturday.
Wait, didn't you have another incident like this where you were looking up a quote and you had the same runaround?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
That one was not as bad, because that one was just, here's a quote from a letter. And I'm like, that letter doesn't exist. And ChatGPT was like, you're right, that letter doesn't exist. Well, good luck.
Yeah.
No, this was me actually trying to find like details on a bill making its way through Congress. And it pulled me into this 4 or 5 hour, what'd you call it? 4 or 5 hour rabbit hole that, I wanted to look into this thing real quick and be done with it and go to bed, but I ended up staying up until like 2 a.m. trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Yeah, not the best result. And, AI was helpful in some cases, but very much not helpful in others. And then there was human error involved too, so the whole thing was just a total cluster foxtrot.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting development. Now, you and I are old enough to remember back, even just like 25 years ago.
Yeah.
In the young internet days, it was practically a slogan where people were like, don't cite the internet. People can put anything they want up on the internet. How are you going to know if anything on the internet is true? And, you wouldn't use citations when writing a book, or when the newspapers would not
if you want to say that something was on the internet, I mean, the rules of citation are fairly easy to understand if you understand what the purpose of them is, right? The purpose of citations is so that a person reading the work can go and confirm that the thing that you are talking about actually says what you're talking about, right? So if you wanted to say, Homestar Runner made a video that talked about this on, April 3rd of, 2002, then you can cite the Homestar Runner website for that, right? The problem is that people say, I saw this website that said that Coca-Cola was actually owned by Pepsi. And someone just wrote that, and then they say, it is common knowledge that Coca-Cola was once owned by Pepsi, and then they cite this website. And the website doesn't cite anybody, it's just someone spouting off. Right? The fact that you're interested in is not that someone says Coke was owned by Pepsi. The fact that you're interested in is whether Coke was or was not owned by Pepsi. And for that, some dude on the internet is not necessarily a definitive source, right?
Well, yeah. So the thing about it is,
that's why you don't say Wikipedia either.
Well, no, but my point is that years ago this was like common. This was a common thing where it's just like it was frowned upon to cite things off the internet.
Yeah.
When it was in its younger days, and this was at a time when people were meticulously gathering information, and you probably could find a lot of correct information. And a lot of times when you had websites that did not have correct information, it was usually pretty obvious, not always, but usually, in the sense that, like, the conspiracy theory pages would often have big glowing golden borders, and there would be like you'd have the astronaut cursor.
We do not listen to what the things with golden borders say here. This is not a court of admiralty, all right?
Fair enough. But the point stands. It's like we used to have a standard at a base level of, I shouldn't necessarily trust everything I see on the internet. And we
Sure.
have come full circle to a time where more people will put up whatever nonsense they want to say without any verification whatsoever on the internet, up to and
Right.
including so many children being on the internet that they could just be making up anything. And honestly, you can't tell the difference between adults writing and children half the time
And sometimes
anymore.
I write book reviews and put those on the internet. I mean, talk about misinformation.
Yeah, right?
Exactly.
But the point is, we have come so far from an inherent distrust to now people are asking the AI if something
Owned
is
by
true.
Twitter. Yeah.
The AI owned by Twitter. like Tom Woods used to I think it was Tom Woods that used to have the joke about this, where it's like, if you hang a presidential portrait up in a building and you quote him and he says something, everyone believes it and worships it and considers it wisdom. But if it was a Walmart CEO hanging in that classroom, everyone would be up in arms about how corporations
weird
have
that is.
taken over
Yeah,
the
exactly.
schools. And so it's but we've gotten there. We've gotten to the point where people are using AI. That is all AI is doing, is scouring and scraping from the internet with no ability to discern whether or not what it's getting is the truth or not, unlike a human
Right.
being who could actually work through whether or not the information he's viewing is based in reality. Thank you, Google Recipes.
Hey, those cookies were fine.
Well, yeah, until you add the praying mantis, then it's a little eyebrow raising.
It was in the recipe. I don't know what to tell you, man.
It didn't even say dead. It just said praying man. Like, grab one off. Leaf.
Well, the assumption is that it dies in the oven.
Fair enough. Which, equally strange because it was a coconut cream pie.
That's a strange type of cookie.
Right?
Exactly.
I messed that joke up, didn't I?
No, you made it better.
Well, let's ask Grok. Did I mess that joke up? Nope.
Oh,
Perfect.
man.
A+.
How far are we from someone being on a podcast and saying, Grok, is that true?
I'm sure
And
it's already
meaning it.
happened. I am 100%
No, but
sure.
no. Think about it this way. There are kids, right? Little kids who were brought up on a tablet tuned to YouTube for Kids. And they think that the words like and subscribe mean good night or goodbye, right? This has happened.
You're right.
I mean, maybe that's apocryphal. I don't know, but I've heard horror stories that this has happened to some poor little kid.
Wait, let's ask Grok if that's true.
Well, let me finish the point. How long before someone believes that Grok is that true is just something that you can just say to, like, as a counter argument or something?
Do you want the honest answer?
I don't know.
Because I have seen human beings do that already, where it's just like someone will say something that is true, and people will pull their phones out and find something somewhere on the internet that says it's not true, and they will be like, well, no, it says here, and the internet is smarter than you, obviously, so this must be right. I have seen that happen in real life. I am sure that we're already there, where there's people that actually think they can get the proper answers off of Grok, and will do so whenever something comes up that they need to know.
Again, I'm not so interested in people actually asking Grok when Grok can hear them. I'm interested in someone being raised in such a way that they believe the phrase "Grok is that true" is a counter-argument.
Yeah, okay, so you're talking about using it kind of like OK Boomer or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, no, I haven't heard it personally.
We might be close, though.
I don't think we'd be far off. It may have already happened in several instances. I mean, that's the thing, though. It's like we're talking about the lack of challenge to younger imaginations, and therefore it's drilled into younger people's heads that this is the way life operates. And if you need an answer, you ask Grok, you ask ChatGPT. Just today, my niece needed help with some math, and she had tried to get the answer off of Google, and I was like, first off, this doesn't help you because you don't know how Google got this answer for you.
Right.
And second off, it's certainly not going to help you on your test. You aren't even able to tell me what the answer is that you pulled off of Google. You wrote it down, but you don't know how it got there. You don't understand what the answer means. And I had to sit down with her and show her I had to remind her, because I've taught her this before, I had to remind her how to do sine, cosine, and tangent to find the side of an angle.
Yeah.
So and she's telling her mother about how a lot of the kids in school are just using AI to get all of their answers, and a lot of the teachers are probably using AI to check them. Which, I mean, the fact that she even knows that, and I've read about that being the case, and I don't think she
Yeah.
reads the same things that you and I do. So
Right.
just the fact that even the kids are aware of that now, that's probably a good thing. At least they're aware that they might be being bamboozled. That's nice, but the fact that everyone so passively is just like, okay, well, I guess that's just the way it is, that kind of sucks.
Yeah, I mean,
And I do think we are, take that extend that hypothesis to everything, not just people saying, Grok, is that true, in response to someone to shut down an argument. I mean,
right.
You and I, from the circles we're in, have already seen different ways that people shut down arguments with inanity.
Right.
But we also have a society-wide problem where not only is too much trust being given to something that people are just finding common use in on the internet, but
Yeah.
think about that from the perspective of, like, Orwellian dystopias. Like, how far off are we from everything being treated that way? We're just, argument just doesn't exist anymore, and basically anything the government wants you to believe, they just have to put in ChatGPT, and nobody will question it anymore.
Oh man, I just had a really bad idea.
Tell me more.
Grok, is he guilty? Gavel.
Yeah, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's kind of like, remember when you were talking about how that mask study was not really a study in one of our videos, and
right.
I'm talking about that with some people, and that was one of the things that I observed in real life, where human beings in front of me just pulled out their phones to just see if there was a study done that proved certain something about masks, and they fully accepted the answer that they got, which would have been the common answer at the time, given the internet censorship.
Well, even more so, in the sense that AIs are typically designed to be servile, or like encouraging, I guess is another word for it, right?
Yeah.
When you talk to ChatGPT, unless you are specifically asking it to tell you why this thing is bad, it'll probably tell you that it's good, and here's why it's good, right? Like if I put into ChatGPT a sample from one of my short stories, it's like, oh, this was cool, and this was cool, and this was interesting, and this was a thing that increased the tension, and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And so the default personality or default perspective of AI is to be promotional towards the person who's asking the question. And so, if someone says into Grok, can you find me any studies that disprove this? Then by the implication of the word disprove, Grok is probably going to look for or manufacture the names and titles of papers that do what it presumes the person asking it wants, right? And we've already seen that these AIs can be very good at, like, knowing more from what you're saying than what you actually think you're saying. And so the amount of subtlety that it can pick up on and say, oh, this person wants this kind of answer, is a lot higher than most people's threshold for nuance.
And that is a point. Would you like a healthy dose of despair to go along with everything you just said?
Oh, lay it on me.
Yeah, so the thing that I observed during that time was before anyone was really using ChatGPT all that much. This was just people looking on the internet for the answer that they wanted because they disagreed with me. It was actually, I believe that was the largest moment at the time where I thought to myself, argument doesn't matter anymore. And so it's pointless to really talk to people about this, like, in this setting. Obviously, there are still good settings to discuss these things, because you and I have both been through that circus, and part of the reason you have discussions with people who will never bother to, check whether or not they're wrong about things is because you're showing the people that are watching that you have looked into this and they have not, and they don't actually have an argument to stand on. And the hope is that people observing that will catch on and be like, oh, maybe there's something to what this other person says. Now, with the caveat that it's possible that there are, you will run into people who are wrong about things, who are very good at arguing their case.
Yeah.
And so when there's something important, there's definitely a bit of it that's worth looking into yourself. If it's truly important, you should have the gumption to discover things on your own. And you should at least have the imagination to ponder whether or not you may be being misled.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I don't put a lot of faith into like live debates, right? Because number one, there's no sources, right? Like someone says, "Oh, I saw a study that says this." If you don't know the first name, the journal, and the year, then you don't know what study you're talking about, basically. And number two, there's the opportunity for just pure rhetorical tricks to make things sound other than they actually are. This is one of the reasons why, I think that before you make a decision, you should read a whole bunch of different things with open mind, because there are going to be people who will be very convincing about really bad ideas that if you let yourself become ideologically captured too quickly, you'll end up stuck in a mindset where there is no possible proof that could be made that could dissuade you from this particular position.
Yeah, and we have examples historically of that being the case, but obviously people nowadays wouldn't look into that and be like, "Oh, wait, maybe I'm being bamboozled."
Me. Well, I mean, it's not just that, right? Because again, if they try to start looking into this and they aren't really, really good at maintaining a neutral tone, the AI assistant that they use to help them figure this out will figure out what side they're on and support it, for instance.
Yeah.
So...
And it's just...
Long story short, mankind is doomed.
Pretty much. I mean, bringing it full circle, what we're talking about here is a lack of imagination, a lack of ability to sympathize or empathize with other characters in a third-person omniscient story.
Okay, cool. We got back to the actual topic. Thank you.
Yeah, and the reason that I get back to it is because this is where that logic leads us. This is where the idea that you just shouldn't write or shouldn't read these kinds of stories, or people that get uptight about it, or just simply can't fathom what's going on in those stories.
That
you need to
be more specific.
Back.
That this particular method of writing is defective in some way.
Yeah. Anyone that's saying that is either a charlatan or needs to step back and reevaluate how they view the world, because everything that we have just said is the culmination of people sitting back and saying, "Well, I don't want to read things where I have to look at any point of view outside of one person's, especially my own."
Who's usually the protagonist.
Yeah.
Who's usually designed to be agreeable to the reader.
Yeah, and this is actually, I mean, if anything, I dislike protagonists that are empty shells that I'm supposed to step into the shoe of more than anything.
I mean,
because there's
your entry on fanfiction.net belies this truth.
Yeah. Wait, which one?
All of them.
Oh, what about the ones on OnlyFans?
Those we don't talk about.
Yeah, we definitely don't view them. Well, not in company.
At least not in front of the paywall.
Not in certain company. No, but seriously, the end result of an entire society refusing to look at things from other perspectives than their own is that we end up in a world where we end up in a dystopian world that's run by a few people who are hungry for power and have control over Grok. And on top of that, all that really happens there is we have a repeat of things that have happened already in the past, where many, many people just bought into one viewpoint without questioning it, up until the point where they gave enough people power that you couldn't question it anymore. And from there,
it's a pretty rough pathway.
Yeah, pretty rough. And I mean, gruel is not the tastiest meal to have every day, so there's that aspect of it too.
That's very true, yeah.
So I mean, if you like good food, read Third Person Omniscient.
Read a variety of different perspectives of books. Learn to enjoy when they're well done, all of them and learn to identify when all of them are done poorly. Because you can certainly do all of them poorly.
Yeah, and keep in mind that, because today I just, for some reason, I feel like being an overly euphemistic, self-righteous blackguard.
Yeah.
Keep in mind that you're not going to hear any kind of discussion like you just heard, connecting all these different dots for these completely, seemingly unrelated things anywhere else. Ladies and gentlemen, we're the best.
Well, we are the wordy pair. We are the 2WA's greatest fiction
agents.
Consultants.
Yeah. 2WA for life.
Exactly.
What does the LIFE stand for? Shut up.
The whole thing's not an acronym. It's an initialism.
Yeah, 2WA is a word, and then life stands for...
Load it for everyone.
Yeah. Guns blazing.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
What else do we have to say about it? I mean, we did go off on a big tangent, but we
went off on a big tangent. That's kind of expected for us at this point. It's like how we accidentally destroy things. I mean, what's important for you as a reader is, if you're listening to this and you're a fiction enthusiast, a reader, then what's important is to kind of get a feel for books that use these different techniques, and to recognize that they're different techniques. And right, there are techniques that you use for a reason, and there are techniques that you use but you're not using them for the right reason, right? So part of becoming a discerning reader is to recognize what these techniques are used for properly and when they're being used wrong. I've already said things kind of similar to that, but, for instance, first-person perspective really makes you get into the shoes of one character. But if you're trying to do like a story about something where there's something very, kind of ambivalent going on, then third-person perspective, Omniscient, is going to help the writing a lot, because the reader is going to understand why each of these different characters with different perspectives has a different, outcome to their reasoning, right? I mean, I feel like I'm being too obvious here, but it is a podcast.
It does seem like there are people that require it.
Yeah.
At this point.
I once told people that they could ask themselves questions to make their writing more deeper, and someone told me that they care more about themes than world building.
Oh, okay.
At no point did I say that you can't ask questions of yourself to make your themes more interesting. I just gave world building examples, and that was the implication that someone took from it.
I mean, I guess that's better than not using your imagination. I mean, if you're going to make some crazy leaps like that, but so it's just a little weird question to pose after that. It's like, okay, buddy, it's cool. You can like what you want. Yeah. I think at a more fundamental level. Yeah. At a more fundamental level, if you're a reader, if you want to be a reader,
yeah,
what is the point of being a reader? And I don't want to say challenged. I don't want to say if you're not challenged, because I've never liked the way people say that. I would find
challenge to be a very strong word for describing a reader coping with various point of views.
Well, no, it's not that. Like I've heard people, the way people phrase it often is that they want to write a book that challenges you. And
you mean read a book or
no. Some people want to write books that will challenge the reader, and usually what they mean by challenge isn't challenge their imagination or intellect. What they usually mean is challenge in the sense that it continuously slaps you in the face about things you believe in, and if you disagree with the author's point of view, that makes you a bad person. That's like 8 times out of 10, I think that's what most people who write books that are supposed to challenge the reader, or if a New York Times review says a book that challenges you, that's usually what it means.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a good point.
At a fundamental level, looking at challenge from the perspective of intellect and imagination, if as a reader you do not want to experience new and interesting ideas that challenge imagination and intellect, what is the point of reading? Why are you doing it? I have to ask, because the only thing I can think is that you want to read books so that you can tell people you read books and sound smart. And that's a dumb person thing. I hate to tell you.
Yeah, that's very
That is
true.
what dumb people do. Dumb people read books just so they can say they read a book and sound smart to other people. Because telling someone you read a book doesn't make you sound smart. I don't know.
Very
I mean,
true.
maybe it does to the other dummies, but that's not the group. You get smarter if you hang out with smarter people. Let's just put it like
Yeah.
that. Not all of intellect is a thing that is based off of how you are born. You can acquire quite the intelligence by consuming information regularly throughout your life. I have
Yeah.
met complete idiots that know more about me than math, science, engineering, all the things that we
I'm the science
generally
one.
associate smart people with. Uh, I mean, there is some degree of, yes, some people are more capable than others, but the number of idiots I've met that are masters at a craft, and I couldn't see them for dust if I were to try and compete with them,
Yeah.
is well over the number of geniuses I've met that I wouldn't be able to compete with in just the average things you do every day.
Yeah, yeah. Did you just say the phrase "I couldn't see them for dust"?
Yeah.
Wow, we're getting too literary here, even for a writing podcast.
Look, you and I know that I'm quoting that from Archie Goodwin.
Which book?
No, not the book in this. I mean, I'm sure that quote was in the book too, but when he says, "At least I could see, at least I could see his dust," when he's talking about Nero Wolfe.
Okay. Well, no, but the combination of "I could not see them for dust" is I think a very like almost Shakespearean
well, yeah, I mean, there's
twist of that Archie Goodwin classic.
That is a way that it is in, let's call it common use, but it's not really a common turn of phrase.
It's very uncommon. It's very archaic at this point, but that was what made me look upon it and marvel a bit.
Yeah. It's kind of sad that it's archaic because people still drive cars through the desert and kick up dust when they move at a high speed.
Yeah, that's true. The other thing that I think might be worth touching on real quick before we finish is that if you're a writer, because we just finished talking about for readers, but if you're a writer and you don't like a particular point of view or something like that, I think that maybe a good metaphor would be, if you are in martial arts and all you want to do is the same hip throw over and over and over again. Writing in different perspectives is a technique, and broadening your abilities to adapt to situations, to work with different techniques is part of being a well-rounded and skilled practitioner of any skill or school of whatever. And so, if you've never written in third person Omniscient, maybe give it a shot. It doesn't have to be a whole novel, but you could do a short story and kind of get your feet wet. If you've never written in first person, give that a shot too. Again, it doesn't have to be the longest work in your repertoire or in your catalog, but it can be something, and you can at least say, "Hey, I did this, and I discovered that this was a hard part, and this was an easy part, and this was a hard part, and this was an easy part, and this is something I thought would be easy that was actually hard."
I agree with everything you said, but I have to give a little pushback on the martial arts thing for a very good reason.
Okay.
You are correct, and it does make sense. However, I can guarantee you that if you do one hip throw or one kick over and over and over again, you will not be the most competent martial artist, but you will have a far better hip throw and kick than anyone you step into a ring with that has a regular, regular karate routine each
sure.
day.
The problem, and I agree with you, that the problem, I mean, proper practice can make these things better and better and better. But I guess the point is that you will be in situations where that hip throw will not be applicable, and if that's all you have, you might find yourself in trouble.
Yeah. I guess the joke to be made there is that it might work for kicks, but if you just write "once upon a time" 100,000 times, being able to write that one sentence very well, it doesn't do much for you.
Right.
I mean, we've all had to write on maybe not on the blackboard these days.
It might in certain avant-garde circles.
Yeah, it would be like when Brian Griffin had the book where he left the entire middle blank and it was supposed to be up to the reader's imagination.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking of like someone writing the words "Once Upon a Time" over and over again and sending that to like a fantasy magazine and getting an award or something.
Yeah, oh God,
what's
who was the actor that did the gritty spittle licking sand thing? What was his name? Him reading that line over and over and over again in different tones and phrases, in different tones and pitch.
It might have been George Plimpton.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe. No, that's not George Plimpton.
No, wasn't George Plimpton the not the
George
president?
Plimpton was Horson Kerr.
Yeah. George
Plimpton was Horson Kerr. He was the general in that episode, and he said, "That's rather a nice epithet, don't you think, Horson Kerr?" No. Gritty spittle licking sand was that other guy who is not nearly as old as the guy as Plimpton was when the Nero Wolfe shows were produced, but I don't remember the actor's name.
Well,
but it was an epithon. It takes hours.
Unfortunately, we are Nero Wolfe fans, so there's not enough
of us.
God,
it's such a good TV show.
It
the
really
books
is.
Are so good.
So people won't know who we're talking about. However, probably much more prominently known, he played Death in Supernatural.
Okay, there we go. All right.
God, Nero Wolfe is so good. It's so good.
Why is it so good? How did they do that?
I don't know how they did that. It's like Umineko. It's just like, these are one-offs. This is never going to happen again. This is...
golden lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, golden truth and lightning in a bottle. You just can't beat it. Like, I live for the day where someone makes a better Nero Wolfe than the 2004 A&E Nero Wolfe, but I don't expect it to happen in my lifetime.
Probably not. All right. I think that's a pretty good episode. Any final thoughts before we close it up?
Yeah, get good.
Get good, scrub.
Don't be a dummy.
Use multiple perspectives.
Well, no, that's not fair. That's not fair because people do write in first person, and there are people that prefer to do that. And
but first person is a perspective.
Yes, it is. You're not obligated to write in first person and third person omniscient just because you're a writer. If you have a style that you like to write and that's the one you like and you're good at, by all means, you can stick to the one you like to do.
But I mean, if you're a writer and you're making money, you're not listening to this podcast.
That's also true. Not only are you not listening to this podcast, you're not creating it either.
Yes, also true. All right. Well,
on that note,
we've got to start. Yeah, exactly. On that note, we will call this an episode. Thanks for listening, everybody. We will get back to you next week with some other fun thing. Not sure what, but we'll figure it out. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I'm a euphemistic blackguard.
Well, we're both euphemistic, self-aggrandizing blackguards. That's what we do here.
That's called a running joke. That's your writing tip for the day. It's a callback, people.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.